the travel quite exhausting then when you guys had to go on the road for a road game? Sort of as we talked a bit just a minute ago about logistics and things like that.
Well, yeah, we used to laugh about it, and somebody asked me. One of my friends called me and said, "What's it like?" Because we had gone from, oh man, I'm trying to think what year it was. I think it was my first year. We had played USC in the opener, and then we had to go to Michigan State for the second game. Well, Michigan State from Hawaii is about, I think it's 12 or 14-hour flight, right? So we would try and break it up. We would fly to LA, stay overnight in LA, because that's 5.5 hours, stay overnight in LA, and fly the other 5.5 or 6 hours the next day, right? But what it ends up, the guy asked me, he said, "What's it like with the travel?" And I said, "Well, it's really not like traveling to go play a road game. It's like going on safari." I mean, because we would go, like, for example, in that conference at that time, Louisiana Tech was I think the easternmost school, right? And that's in Louisiana. And so, and that's not hard. That's a hard place to get to anyway, right? So we would fly to Dallas or Houston, spend the night there, practice there the next day, and then go up. Like, we would leave Hawaii. We'd practice in Hawaii on Wednesday. The kids would go to school, and then we'd get a plane out. We'd get an evening flight out. So we'd fly all night. They'd get into Houston. They'd eat. We'd put them to bed, get them up that afternoon, because usually we played at night in Louisiana or Alabama or any of the places we played. We'd get them up that night. We'd practice them that night at the time that we trying to get the body clocks used to the time change. Then the next day would be, so it'd be Wednesday, Thursday, we'd do that. Friday, which is the day before the game, we would fly on to or however we needed to get to the next place. So, for example, like when we went to Alabama, we would leave on Wednesday, get to Houston, practice, do our meetings, all that stuff you do. And then Friday flew to Birmingham, stayed in Birmingham Friday night, then drove with a police escort 45 minutes up the road to Tuscaloosa. And after we played the game, we drove back to Birmingham, stayed overnight, because it would be 1:00 in the morning by the time we got back there. So you'd stay overnight, Saturday night. Sunday, you'd get on a plane and you'd fly all the way back to Honolulu through either Dallas or LA, because there's no Birmingham to Honolulu flights. So Birmingham. So we would get home Monday morning. Wow. Right. So it's almost, I mean, it was amazing. And then you may have to go travel again the next week.
Yeah.
Think about some of the places we had to travel to, like Moscow, Idaho. Moscow, Idaho, you can't get there. I mean, they don't even have an airport. So you got to fly to San Jose, then fly from San Jose to Spokane. And then from Spokane, you got a bus an hour and a half to Moscow. Laramie, Wyoming, you got to fly to Denver, which is 8 hours or 10 hours from Hawaii. Then you got to get on a bus and you got to go an hour and a half up the road to Laramie, because they don't have an airport either. They don't have an airport big enough for a big plane. Right. So, it was crazy. Las Cruces, New Mexico, where New Mexico State is, you had to fly to LA. Then from LA, you had to fly to El Paso. And then you had to get on a bus in El Paso and bus 2 hours back west again to get to Las Cruces. So it was an adventure. And we, like I said, we were on safari every time. And because the kids would miss, like, you think about it, they'd miss Thursday and Friday classes.
Yeah.
Right. And, they'd be getting off the plane, 6:30 in the morning on Monday morning. Well, they ain't going to class on Monday after they've been flying all that time. So we would take tutors. They'd have to take their books. We'd have study table, on the road, So it was a deal now.
Yeah, I bet. Jeez. And were there ever like any performances where you could just tell maybe that the team was just exhausted from traveling? I mean, I can just imagine, say you're halfway through the season, you've got injuries racking up, just how the season progresses anyway.
I tell you what, it was it was the trip to Ruston, Louisiana, because it was fly to Houston. It was that whole deal. Fly to Houston, practice. And the next day we said, Ruston doesn't have an airport. So you either have to fly to Shreveport and bus for an hour, or Monroe and bus for an hour. Either way, you're busing, right? And it's 5-hour drive from Houston to Ruston. And so June said one time, he had done it the other way where we had flown. Well, by the time you go to the Houston airport, because we didn't fly charter, right? Because we couldn't afford it. So we fly commercial flights. You got to go to the airport. You got to go through security. You got to check in. You got to do all that. Then you fly to Shreveport. Then you got to get off. You got to load the bus. You got to, all that stuff. By the time it ends up being an 8-hour day when you could drive for 5.5 hours. So we bussed from Houston to Ruston. And that was at the time when Katrina was happening. Right. And so we go to there's only like 2 reasonable sized hotels in Ruston. So we go to the hotel, and they've got a bunch of Katrina refugees living in the hotel. And these were people that were out of New Orleans that lost everything. I mean, and it was like living in a refugee camp. And we're trying to get ready to play a football game the next night, right? And so there's all these distractions, and it was crazy. So we went out and played them my first year on the road at their place. And you could tell our kids were tired and they were distracted and they weren't ready to play, and they just beat us. I mean, they drilled us. And we were a young team that was learning how to play and how to win and how to be a team. And that one was just too much for us. Yeah. And 2 years later, we went back there, did the same thing, but we had matured. We knew how to be, we were a team by then. Colt had been there. It was his 3rd year. The offensive line had been together. The defense had gotten better. And then we really pounded them 2 years later in the same situation. So, but that was the game that I thought, and the Michigan State game too, because it was just so long. And then you're going to Spartan Stadium and there's 85,000 people. And, our kids never really got intimidated by that kind of stuff, but it was just the time change and the travel and all that.